You think you know Princess Diana, the people's princess, the fairy tale bride, the world's most photographed woman. But when she sat down to write her final wishes, she made a choice that stunned the royal family, confused the public, and put an ordinary man from Derbyshire in charge of her legacy. Not a prince, not a lawyer to the crown, her butler. Today, we go through the real story of Princess Diana's will, what she actually left behind, who she actually trusted, and why that decision still shapes the way the world talks about her, nearly 3 decades later. Diana Frances Spencer was born into aristocracy, but not into fame. She grew up at Park House and later Althorpe, surrounded by the Spencer family's long history. But her own childhood was marked by her parents' divorce, something she rarely spoke about publicly, but which those close to her said shaped her deeply. She was 19 when she began seeing Prince Charles, and 20 when she married him, on the 29th of July, 1981, at St. Paul's Cathedral. An estimated global television audience in the hundreds of millions watched her walk down the aisle in a dress with a 25-foot train. It was, by any measure, one of the most watched events of the century. But the marriage that the world saw as a fairy tale was, from very early on, something far more difficult behind closed doors. Diana spoke openly about this herself, most famously in her 1995 Panorama interview with Martin Bashir, where she described her marriage, her struggles with bulimia, and her sense of isolation within the royal family. She also acknowledged, in that same interview, Charles's relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, telling the nation, in her own words, that there were 3 people in her marriage. The couple formally separated in 1992 and divorced in 1996. Diana lost the title Her Royal Highness as part of the settlement, though she retained the title Diana, Princess of Wales, and remained the mother of a future king. What followed the divorce was not a retreat from public life, but arguably its most active chapter. Freed from many of the constraints of official royal duty, Diana threw herself into causes that the institution around her had often kept at arm's length. In 1987, she was photographed shaking hands, without gloves, with a patient at London's Middlesex Hospital AIDS ward, at a time when public fear and misinformation about HIV transmission were widespread. The image did more to challenge stigma around AIDS than almost any single public statement of the era. In January 1997, months before her death, she visited Angola with the Halo Trust and was photographed walking through a cleared minefield in body armor and a visor, drawing global attention to the humanitarian cost of landmines. She returned to the landmine cause again that same year in Bosnia. Later in 1997, the Ottawa Treaty banning anti-personnel landmines was signed by dozens of countries. Campaigners and historians alike have credited her visibility with helping keep the issue in the public eye during a critical period, alongside the work of the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, which won the Nobel Peace Prize that same year. She also worked with organizations supporting people affected by leprosy, homelessness, and mental health, often visiting hospitals and shelters with far less press fanfare than the images the tabloids preferred. None of this healed her relationship with the institution she'd married into. But it built something else, a public identity entirely her own, built on causes rather than ceremony. Diana signed her will on June 1, 1993, a document that would later be made public, in part, after her death, through UK probate records, as a standard for wills of this size and public interest. Her estate at the time of her death in August 1997 was estimated at around £21 million. Some contemporary reports placed it closer to £30 million after later valuations of jewelry, property interests, and other assets. It was notably entirely her own money, built through her divorce settlement, personal investments, and asset sales, not funds tied to the crown or the duchy. The will's core structure was straightforward. The bulk of her estate was placed in trust for her 2 sons, William and Harry, with the funds structured so they would receive access in stages, a portion at 25, with full access at 30. This was, by most legal accounts, a fairly conventional trust structure for an estate of this size, designed to prevent young heirs from receiving a large sum all at once. She also left instructions and modest bequests to godchildren and staff, along with personal items, jewelry, clothing, and keepsakes, some of which were later distributed to her sons and goddaughters, and others sold at auction. with proceeds going to charity. What made the will genuinely unusual wasn't the money. It was who she chose to carry it out. Diana named her mother, Frances Shan Kidd, and her sister, Lady Sarah McCorquodale, as executors and trustees of her will, the people with formal legal authority over the estate. But it was her former butler, Paul Burrell, who became the far more public and controversial figure connected to her legacy in the years that followed, not because the will made him executor, but because of the role he took on afterward, as a self-described guardian of her personal belongings, letters, and memory. Burrell had worked for the royal family for over a decade, first as a footman to the Queen and later as Diana's butler, and by his own account, and that of people close to Diana, he was one of the people she trusted most in her final years. After her death, he retained a large number of her personal items, letters, photographs, clothing, and keepsakes, which he said Diana's family had given him permission to look after. In 2001, Burrell was arrested and charged with theft, accused of taking hundreds of items belonging to Diana's estate without authorization. The trial, held in 2002, became a major public spectacle, offering an unusually intimate look at Diana's private world, her state of mind in her final years, and her relationships with her family and the palace. The case collapsed abruptly in November 2002 when it emerged that the Queen recalled a private conversation with Burrell shortly after Diana's death, in which he told her he was holding some of Diana's belongings for safekeeping. That recollection, once confirmed, was enough for prosecutors to drop the case, and Burrell was cleared without a defense ever being formally presented. The following year, in 2003, Burrell published a memoir, A Royal Duty, drawing on his access to Diana's private letters and personal recollections. It became an international bestseller, and it deeply angered members of the royal family. Prince Charles was reported to be furious at what he considered a breach of trust, and Diana's sons were said to feel similarly betrayed by the level of personal detail made public. Whatever the tension over Burrell's book and belongings, the substance of Diana's will did exactly what it was designed to do. William and Harry received their inheritance in stages as adults, allowing each of them financial independence without the sudden, unmanaged wealth that can derail young heirs. Diana's personal charitable interests, AIDS research and support, landmine clearance, and children's welfare, continued to receive attention and funding long after her death, carried forward by the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, established shortly after she died, which distributed millions of pounds to causes she had championed. Her sons, both of whom have spoken publicly over the years about growing up in the shadow of her death and her legacy, have each in their own way continued threads of her work. William through mental health advocacy and the Diana Award, Harry through his own charitable ventures, and more recently his public departure from royal duties, which he has directly connected to pressures around privacy, media intrusion, and his mother's death. The 2007 inquest into Diana's death, led by Coroner Lord Justice Scott Baker, concluded in 2008 that she was unlawfully killed due to the grossly negligent driving of her driver, Henri Paul, who was found to have been over the drink-drive limit, and the reckless pursuit by photographers following the car. The inquest closed one of the most persistent sources of public speculation about her death, even as some conspiracy theories have persisted regardless of the official findings. What makes Diana's will genuinely remarkable isn't a hidden clause or a secret fund. It's how ordinary the document itself was, set against how extraordinary the life behind it had been. She left her sons protected, but not shielded from responsibility. She left her charitable causes provisioned for, but not micromanaged from beyond the grave. And she trusted people around her, her mother, her sister, and later, in the public's eye, her former butler, with the parts of her story that mattered most to her. The image that endures isn't a secret trust or a hidden fortune. It's a woman who spent the last years of her life building an identity independent of the crown, and then made sure, through the ordinary mechanics of a will, that the people and causes she cared about most would be looked after when she no longer could do it herself. That, more than any headline about secret clauses, is the real story of what Princess Diana left behind. If you found this story worth your time, let us know what part of Diana's legacy surprised you most.